Good morning, anybody who is joining us live, and hello to anyone who is joining us later. My name is Brenton, and today we're going to do a full body yoga practice that will help us find our neutral pelvis and work from our neutral pelvis and return towards our neutral pelvis, and then getting everything else to do all the fun things they're designed to do, like hips that can move around in different ways and shoulders that can move around in different ways. So I hope by the end of today's practice, you feel really well worked and activated through your entire body, and that you have a little bit more access to your neutral pelvis. And I think we'll experience together a whole bunch of different reasons why it's nice to have access to your neutral pelvis when you want to be in a neutral pelvis. So to get started, let's go ahead. If you have a yoga block around you, you can grab that. If you don't, grab something else that can either be like a cushion or something like that. Okay, so where we're gonna get started is on our back with the block underneath the sacrum. So if you're using a yoga block, maybe the bottom or the middle height for this one. And the sacrum is like a little fusion of low back bones that attach to the back of the pelvis where those little dimples are. So it's just kind of here on the block, maybe starting to rock the pelvis a little bit up and down. And remember, if you don't have a block, you can even like roll up a towel or something like that and have that underneath the sacrum. So the hips are lifted. Now, taking the hands to the front of the pelvis, let's find our frontal hip bones so we know where those are. And maybe just holding those with our thumbs so the rest of our fingers are free. Let's move and spider the rest of our fingers around to see if we can find our pubis bone, which is pretty low down towards the underside of the pelvis. It's like a really intimate little spot. But if you crawl your fingers down far enough, you should find a bone there that is discernible as a bone. So the relationship of these bones, what does neutral pelvis mean? In this position, it means that they're about the same, they're level in space. So now if I keep the bones here, picking the pelvis up and keeping those bones level, removing the block, okay? And then I'm just gonna map the hip bones, and kind of with the brain, I know where the pubis bone is, but if you don't know where it is, you can always reach down and find it. And from here, we're just going to touch up and down with the hips. And what we're trying to find here is the experience of these bones moving at the same rate up and down. We also want to feel our glutes. Those are the big booty muscles, generate some of this movement. And of course, we want the low back to feel good, because that's part of finding a neutral pelvis, is arranging the low back in its natural curve. So let's hold it up here, see if we can get the glutes going a little bit. And while we're doing this, we're just breathing, relaxing through our face. As the sensation starts to build in the glutes and the backs of the legs, we just remain calm. Trying to breathe low, deep, evenly, easily. Okay, so going ahead, taking yourself all the way down by lowering the pelvis at an even rate. Let's go ahead and find our block again, this time between the legs. We can have the legs go up a little bit. So I'm just gonna kind of rock and roll on the floor here, see if I can find the pelvis on the sacrum on the ground, and I can feel those hip bones and the pubis bone. And I want them to be about the same level away from the ground. And then from here, you'll notice that when you do that, it kind of like deepens your hip crease. Root your whole torso down. Okay, so from here, we're gonna interlock the hands behind the head, keeping the neck nice and soft. We'll lift up off the shoulder blades. So the head can be nice and soft into the hands. We're just feeling this movement here. So no strain in the neck, no strain in the shoulders. Keep your breath nice and easy. And use the sheeting on the front of the body to lift the chest up. Try to keep your pelvis in neutral and the crease deep in your hips right here as you contract the wall of the belly and bring the chest up. As you feel ready, release and relax. So you always have the option to keep the intensity right where it is. So coming up off the shoulder blades again. Okay, find that nice deep hip crease there as the pubis bone and the hip bones are at the same height in space. Now, keeping the pelvis where it is, keeping the rib cage pulled down, we can see if we can move the legs away from us an inch, like towards that side. And then bringing the legs back up, releasing everything down. Okay, so you can tell that we're asking the hips to become a little bit more sophisticated. We're trying to set the pelvis in neutral and then hold it in neutral, which is going to be really hard. So let's come up again. Remember, no strain in the upper body. So if your upper body is straining, maybe just stick with this level of complexity. You're always the one who decides here, keeping pelvis as neutral as you can, ribs pulled down, moving the legs away any amount. Holding, bringing the legs back up and releasing down. Okay, this last time, I'll go ahead and just be quiet here and we'll each kind of pick the right place for us to play. So find your neutral pelvis as best you can understand that. Lifting up off the shoulder blades, head is soft into the hands. And you just move on your own. And watch for your neck straining at any moment. So don't move so far in the legs that your neck strains. Woo! When you're ready, come on out of that. Hopefully you feel a little bit more turned on through the abdomen. That would be the goal. Let's go ahead. Roll around up to tabletop position. So your first time in tabletop position is just for you to move around in any way that feels good. And so as you're kind of moving around here, starting to feel a sense of, well, where are my hip bones? Where's my pubis bone? Could I identify that just with my attention? Could I get those sets of structures to be kind of evenly lifted? And where the arrangement of that is such that it sets the low back in neutral. So a neutral curve is like a slight back bend. So when we're training neutral pelvis, we're also training neutral low back, which can be a very supportive thing to train. Now at the same time, the whole front of the body is lifting upwards. The rib cage is lifting upwards into the shoulder blades. So getting a sense for that. And then keeping all of that sense as we come down onto the forearms. Elbows go narrow. You decide if your hands are wide or together. Relax the neck as you lift off the knees. So here the purpose to get ourselves nice and turned on through the muscles of the arms, the chest, the armpits, the upper back. That can be a lot to pay attention to. If you're ready to pay attention to a bit more, you can widen your stance and try to get the pelvis neutral in this upside down position. So the pelvis neutral here is kind of like a piggy bank tipping upside down. So I want to be able to nice deepen the hip creases, right? And where the low back is in its natural curve. And at the same time, the ribs are lifting into the shoulder blades. And as we feel ready, coming all the way down. Coming up to the hands from here. From the hands, let's come back towards that tabletop position. Seeing if we can feel neutral pelvis, neutral low back, And then of course, the front body and the ribs lifting up to meet the shoulder blades. So keeping our neutral pelvis position, can we tuck and untuck the toes? Seems like it should be easier, right? But I found it's not super straightforward. So now toes tuck under. Could I keep neutral pelvis and press off the knees? Still feeling the whole front body lifting up, ribs lifting up into the shoulder blades and down. Getting the arms to fire as we lift up and down. 2 more times. Lifting up, tipping ourselves all the way up and back, downward facing dog. Where it's here, we want to learn that our legs are levers of the pelvis. That means that we can use our legs to move our pelvis or to hold our pelvis still. So you can use your legs to position it, basically. Now feel here in your downward facing dog, how much is your tailbone sort of scooping down towards your heels or wanting to do that, right? So in this case, the hip bones and the pubis bone need to, it's like the tailbone needs to lift up to get the low back in neutral so that the hip bones and the pubis bone are at the same diagonal in space to the spine. Seeing if I can maintain that as we walk the hands all the way back to the legs. So again, deep hip crease here. That's going to be another mark of neutral pelvis. So that with the angle of the low back, my hip bones and my pubis bone share that same trajectory. Okay? From here, pressing down through the feet, relaxing through the neck, grounding and rolling the spine all the way up. Okay, once we get up here, welcome my friends. In this position, neutral pelvis when you're standing upright is hip bones right over the pubis bone. And again, feeling that natural back bendy position of the low back, it's like, what could I do to get my pelvis secure into its neutral position? And then with the ribs, tipping the ribs up and down. So that when we do a lot of our movement today, we're gonna map neutral pelvis with our hands. And part of what we'll use to map will be our ribs. So we want to get the ribs as neutral as we can over the pelvis. For a lot of us, you know, the ribs are going to feel kind of stuck either in this upward position or kind of in this rounded back position. So we want to try to get the ribs right up over the pelvis. And then feeling all of that, even taking the hands back into the head, because the head is the other side of the pelvis, up at the neck. So we feel the chin draw into the throat and the head draw up and back. Not changing the shape of the pelvis or the ribs, but just getting a little bit longer. And now we can just breathe and move the arms. And then from here, this last time, let's go ahead and map the hip bones with the rib cage here. So we just take our hands like that. This gives us some information about the sheet on the front of the body. So I want to maintain this. I don't want to disrupt this at all as I bend through the knees here. Okay? And then for our halfway lift, really sinking back into the glutes as I deepen the hip creases and come forward any amount. So just coming up and down, toggling in and out. And this is really our time. You can see here, very challenging to keep the pelvis and the spine and the ribs all sort of knit into one experience that can withstand this hinging forward and standing up. And so now I'd like us to find just any amount forward that we can, where the low back is in that nice neutral position, hip bone to ribs to armpits, that all feels pretty in line. Where's my pubis bone? Is it in that same diagonal, right? And then from here, taking the arms back, but keeping the ribs lifted. The neck is not triggered here, so we try to make that feel as good as possible. as we start to reach the arms forward, not changing anything. And back and forward. And just doing that a couple of times. And then forward as we feel ready, tipping forward all the way over the legs. Let's go ahead, walk ourselves forward, downward facing dog position. Feeling the pose just for a bit so we can start to get a sense of strong arms pushing out of them, lots of space in our shoulders and our collarbones, good feeling neck. So just getting ourselves really used to that weight-bearing position so we feel strong each and every time we come back. Now with that strength, could you find that neutral pelvis where your low back is in its natural little low back curve? Use your legs to lever and position and move your pelvis. And then as you feel ready, pushing off the hands one at a time, feeling nice and strong as we walk ourselves all the way back to the feet. From this position here, let's ground through the feet. Feel your frontal hip bones draw in as you roll all the way up. Unfurl yourself up to a stand. As you breathe in, neutral pelvis, all the way up with the arms. As you breathe out, bend the knees first, tipping forward, neutral pelvis. Hold here with the arms back. As we feel ready, we might reach the arms forward, maintaining that low back. And back. One more. As we feel ready, tipping forward over the legs. Here we go. Walking ourselves all the way forward, downward facing dog. All right, let's go ahead, shift forward towards our plank, our top of a push-up, shoulders over the hands. Seeing if we can get a sense of neutral pelvis here with the ribs lifting up to meet the shoulder blades. As we feel ready from here, lowering the knees down to the ground, can I get a sense for where my pelvis is, where my low back is, right? That's the relationship I'm tracking. Keeping the chest nice and open, pulling the hands down and back as we come all the way down to the floor. Coming all the way down here to get neutral pelvis down here. Can you feel how your hip bones want to kind of rest into the floor and your pubis bone wants to kind of flip up? So you got to work to ground the pubis bone down, drawing the frontal hip bones into the body. You use your glutes and your lower abdomen to help secure that. And then find an arm position that works for you, cactus or arms forward. And we'll just lift opposite leg and arm. So lift the leg off the ground without changing neutral pelvis as best you can. Then take it down. We'll do the other side. So the lift is just coming from, let's alternate, the muscles on the backs of the legs. Make sure the neck is in a good feeling position. And the front of the pelvis drawing towards the spine, that starts a chain reaction through the whole front of the body. So the whole front of the body is lifting up towards the spine. Okay, from here, taking the hands wide back, maybe even like off the mat if you're okay with that. Rolling the shoulders back, getting yourself nice and organized through the chest. Can I keep my pelvis and my ribs neutral as I push up to tabletop? And then back to downward facing. Okay, downward facing dog at the back of the mat here. One more time to go ahead, push off the hands, walking all the way back to the feet there at the back. Grounding through the feet, frontal hip bones roll in as we roll the spine all the way up. Arms reaching all the way out and up to the sky. As we feel ready, hands down through the center. Bending into the knees a little bit, finding neutral pelvis and ribs as we hinge forward. Find your hinge stopping point, arms back, forward and back. And so here is one of those fun things, like if we set our pelvis in neutral, we say, okay, I want to hold that. It makes the hips work really hard. And then at the top of the body, we're kind of doing the same thing with the ribs. We're kind of holding them still, and we're saying, okay, shoulders, your time to shine. As we feel ready, tipping ourselves all the way down and forward, we can walk ourselves all the way forward to high plank. Okay, so getting ourselves nice and lifted here. You can go ahead. Remember, like the neck is part of all of this too. So that's where like the pelvis ends. So the pelvis is lifted, the ribs are lifted, the neck is lifted. One knee down to the floor, then the other, trying not to change neutral pelvis. Taking the leg back, underneath, and back. Trying to hold neutral pelvis. Okay, from here, we'll maybe take the knees down, feel the pelvis, feel everything lift up into the shoulder blades, control with the hands as you come all the way down. Okay, so once we're down here on the floor, again, find neutral pelvis as you tense the fingers wide, elbows lifted. Remember, neutral pelvis helps keep the low back in a natural curve, and that's where it feels nice and supported. Not that it shouldn't ever move out of its natural curve, but for here, let's try to experience this. Feel the front pelvis drawing in as you push down and roll off the mat any amount. Choose the range of motion that works for you. Really think about this as the front of the body pulling towards the back of the body to initiate the movement, and it all starts at the front of that pelvis. As we feel ready from here, hands can go wide, organize the chest, pressing up to the knees. Let's go ahead, walk the hands underneath the shoulders, come towards a tabletop position here. Trying to find that neutral pelvis, right? And then maintaining that neutral pelvis, not letting it scoop underneath us here. Let's go ahead and see, can I stretch the hips back towards the heels? Any amount, and you just see what your body will give you. And bringing it back forward. Doing that a couple of times. You'll notice that, like, wow, a lot of really subtle things in the abdomen have to get turned on. Nice and active. Coming down to downward facing dog. Here we go, all the way up and back. Finding that nice space there in the abdomen and the hip creases. From here, you can bend your knees and decide if you want to step or walk all the way forward to the top of the mat. Take your time. So we'll all meet all the way up here at the top, forward folding. As we breathe in, this time let's come up to our hip hinge. See if we can feel ourselves there. Maybe this time the arms can go in front of us, but the chest is still nice and open. Neck is up in line with our spines. Keeping our ribs here, flying the arms out and down. Try not to move in the pelvis, the low back, or the ribbies. As we feel ready, hands to the hips, reversing all the way on up. Here we go. Inhale, reaching the arms wide and high. Exhale, taking the hands down. Feeling our neutral pelvis when the spine is at a diagonal. So coming down into chair. Right? Okay, so neutral pelvis, like let's bounce a little bit, is the relationship between the pelvis and the low back. Neutral low back, neutral pelvis. So we just see here, could I find a little bit of that and then freeze the movement back here? So I'm not moving at my low back or my pelvis here. Instead, I'm moving just at my legs and my hips. As we feel ready, tipping all the way down and forward. Here we go. Breathing in, maybe coming out of the position, halfway arms wide. And then as we feel ready, hands down to the floor, step it back towards downward facing dog. Starting to feel a little bit more space in the hips, hopefully. Pressing out through the hands. As we feel ready, we can go ahead, shift it forward towards high plank, top of a push-up, and then shift it back towards downward facing. Just kind of seeing how that series works with us today. And what could you do to move the pelvis nice and smoothly in a way that aims to preserve the neutral curve of the low back pretty much the whole time? You don't have to be perfect. Coming forward any way you like to come all the way down. Once we come all the way down to the floor here, let's return to locust pose. Lifting the legs one at a time, just kind of swimming them a little bit. Nice soft through the neck. So if you ever feel your low back pinch and back bends, guess what it tells you? It tells you, wow, my pelvis must not be in neutral. My low back must not be in neutral here. So we just see like lifting, and it's fine for the low back to extend more than its normal back bendy position. It's just, is it bending at the, well, other parts are stuck? That's a big question. We want every part to move, and next week we'll work on our spines. Okay, let's go ahead. Coming back, hands wide, pressing all the way back up. Downward facing dog is where we'll meet. From our downward facing dog, let's go ahead. You can step or lightly bend your knees and hop forward. I like to hop, I just don't have anything under this carpet right now. So it slides. As you feel ready, coming out of the position halfway, and then hands down, coming all the way up to stand. Inhale, we can reach the arms wide and high. Exhale, hands down in front of the chest. Okay, so let's go ahead, step the left foot back so we're lunging. Maybe it's a shorter lunge than you might normally do because we want pelvis neutral. And in this position, since the spine is nice and lifted and neutral, that's what we want our pelvis to be. So push back into your back leg so that you can get your frontal hip bones right up over the pubis bone. You can reach down there and feel. And then taking the hands to the ribs, get the ribs nice and lifted up over the pelvis, okay? From here, choose an arm variation that works for you, whether it's just arms forward, trying to keep the arms nice and active, not hanging off the torso, or moving them more towards an overhead or a different position of your choice. Okay, from here, let's go ahead, turn ourselves open to the side, heels in, toes out. How's it going, my friends? A little bit of bouncy here. When you bounce, we're not tipping in the pelvis. We're not tipping the pelvis forward or backward. Instead, it's nice and upright. So get a little sense for that. Support from the glutes, support from the legs. Turn her towards the back. So here we are in a high lunge towards the back. And we got to kind of do the same thing here. So pelvis neutral, ribs neutral, arms reaching. And just kind of finding a moment here to find the position. Now from here, taking the hands down to the torso, I'm going to see, can I preserve the relationship between hip bone and rib cage as I hinge forward over that front leg? So here we are, hands down to the floor, moving the left leg back towards one-legged dog. So one-legged dog, you get to decide how you're moving here. You can do like the toe taps up and down, or if you got a sense for it, feel neutral pelvis, neutral with your spine, and then left leg out and in. And again, trying to keep the low back not moving. That's harder than it seems like it should be. And then as you feel ready, knee in, shifting forward, hips up and left foot down between the hands. Here we go, root down, coming all the way up. Here we are in our lunge. So we find ourselves in that lunge again. This time, finding the mapping of hip bone to rib cage. Tipping ourselves forward here, bopping the back foot in. Preserve all of that hip bone, rib cage. All right, we're gonna see, can I lift off and have my standing leg support me? And we want the same distance on both sides, so we're trying not to swivel on the standing leg. That's gonna put it in that glute. Go ahead, rock yourself on back, turn yourself open towards horse. Here we are. Bouncing a little bit here. Turning ourselves towards the front. Here we are, we're in our lunge. Okay? So from here, finding the mapping hip bone to rib cage, seeing can I preserve that as I tip forward? Could I bump the back foot in a little bit? Continue to preserve it as I lift off the back leg. And I can feel a lot changing in there. I just want to see, can it hold it? Can it hold it? Can it hold it? Taking the left foot down, hands to the floor, right foot up and back, one-legged dog. Again, the toe taps or the out and ins. This time the out and in, right knee in, shifting forward, hips up, right foot down. Here we go, let's come on up again. High lunge. Hello, my friends. Maybe coming all the way up here. As we feel ready, from here, hands down, turning ourselves open, horse position. This time, turning in the feet, so you're alternating between warrior two and horse. And if you're not super familiar with warrior two, you're just pivoting your feet open and close one at a time. But here I want to see like my pelvis is neutral. It can turn this way and this way, but I don't want it to tip. Okay, so let's go ahead, come towards the back now. So here we are in our lunge. We just kind of find our moment here. We're zipping the whole front of the body in towards the back wall of the body. Okay. From here, we're going to take the hands down. We're going to step the back foot to meet the front foot. So we're just standing together at the back of the mat here. Here we go, my friends. Could I preserve the low back and pull the right knee up? So the crease really, really full there. Now I'm going to map hip bone to arm or to rib cage here. As I bend the standing leg a little bit, it's got to be strong because we're going to hinge forward on the standing leg any amount. And then we can hinge ourselves back up. So just kind of working at your own pace. And this next time, if you want to, play with extending your right leg back towards warrior three, and then curling it back in, all the while keeping the pelvis neutral. As you feel ready, right foot touches down behind. That was big, nice and warm. Heels in, toes out towards the center of the mat. Here we are. Let's go ahead, turn ourselves towards a warrior two to the right. Feel like your legs are nice and strong. I oftentimes bend this back leg to feel a little bit more connected to some strength. And then from here, find yourself neutral pelvis, neutral ribs. You can do the same thing. The mapping works here. And then maybe you just want to kind of tip up and down. So it's as if the torso is trying to disturb our neutral pelvis. And as the torso kind of washes forward,
It'll load the front hip more. As it washes back, it'll load the back hip more. So get the hips nice and strong here. As we feel ready, coming back through center, heels in, toes out. Feel the support of your hips. And then turning ourselves towards warrior two to the other side. So again, finding nice neutral pelvis to the ribs. And you decide if and when you move into other variations. So maybe the arms go out. Maybe you move a little bit. And then as we feel ready, coming all the way back through center here, horse pose, turning ourselves towards the front. All right, so here we are. We're in our lunge position. Let's go ahead, step the back foot all the way forward. So we're just gonna start from a nice, strong, tall, standing position. All right, so could I find neutral pelvis? Sometimes I'm gonna shake a little bit. Neutral pelvis, neutral ribs, all that good stuff. Okay, and then rooting down, I'm gonna map left leg up. And with left leg up, slight bend in the standing leg, keeping neutral in the pelvis, between the pelvis and the ribs. Here we go, we can hinge forward and up. And just working the hinge a few times, because the hinge is quite confusing once you take one leg up. I mean, it's quite confusing without you taking one leg up. So let's go ahead. If you want to start playing with that warrior three, you can. And it should really feel like the hip creases and the glutes are driving the motion. Hip creases on the front and the glutes. So after this last one, let's go ahead and meet with one foot right next to the other. Here we are at the top. Great job. Let's go ahead and from here, shift ourselves a little bit left to right with wide legs. Shift ourselves a little bit. Did you just take a shower? Oh, yay. Ollie just took a shower. Maybe I'll do that afterwards too. So shifting a little bit left to right here, so you're in like a wide-legged chair. Okay, from this wide-legged chair, let's take the measurement again. We're gonna shift over into the left foot. See, can I pull my right foot off the ground? And then can I take my right foot down, shift over, same thing. So just moving like that a few times, a little strength. And for anybody who wants to move more towards like a half moon, which is also crazy to kind of feel here, the outer seam of that left leg lifting up as the body twists open on that standing hip. And kind of moving ourselves down and towards the other side. And it's like, okay, once I get the foot off the ground, could I rotate, open on the standing leg without the standing leg collapsing on the outside? Okay? I don't know if that really makes sense. Hopefully it does. So turning open on the standing leg, but the outside of the standing leg is lifting all the way up to the glute. And that'll turn the glute on the standing leg like crazy. So if you're working with me here, opening up on the standing leg, you maybe extend the lifted leg for a high half moon. So you're well off the floor here. Don't worry if the standing leg doesn't go straight. As you feel ready, taking the legs down. Today's practice is more about the pelvis. So let the legs be in service of the pelvis, coming over to the other side. As you lift up, the idea is that maybe we would be able to rotate open on the standing hip any amount, that the outer seam of that leg would support us, and that maybe we could extend that left leg or the lifted leg. As we feel ready, taking everything in, one foot by the other, Shake it out a little bit. Okay, so that was some glute-tastic work. It's like, what are we doing? Last week's class? So here we go at the top of the mat, feeling ourselves. Inhale, breathing, reaching all the way up. And as you feel ready, tipping forward at the hips, forward fold. Breathing, reaching up. Could we come out of the position about halfway? And then hands down, stepping all the way back towards downward facing dog. As we feel ready from here, shifting forward towards tabletop position. Let's go ahead, come out to a seat. Coming all the way down to our bottom with our heels in front of us on the ground. With the hands behind us, we can just move the pelvis through some cat-cows. And then we can decide, like, do I want to externally rotate my legs? So heels in, toes out. Again, maybe just moving through a few cat-cows. And then do I want to do heels together, feet together, knees wide, again, for a few cat-cows. So if you can do cat-cows unsupported, to the point where the pelvis is neutral, when you're sitting, the bottom of the pelvis has the sit bones. And so the sit bones are on the like backside of the pelvis. So the sit bones, when you're weighted centered left to right, front to back, should correlate with hip bones, kind of right above pubis bone. And so we try to find that as much as we can, getting the rest of the spine to lift on top of that. And right here, just from this work, I can feel an intense stretch through the inner lining of the leg. It's very quiet, but that's what I'm learning to appreciate. I don't need big sensations in passive stretches. That no longer signals to me that I'm doing a good job in a pose, because I want it to feel more active, more supportive, more controlled. As we feel ready from here, lifting up through the legs, rolling all the way down onto our backs. Let's go ahead and find a neutral pelvis in here, but before we do that, maybe just windshield wipering a little bit. You maybe even like to clasp your elbows behind your head. So I hope you feel pretty worked here. These windshield wipers kind of help loosen us up, give us a little twisting opportunity. We'll do a lot more twisting next week when we do our class called Snaky Spine. And then as you feel ready, let's find neutral pelvis again as you draw the knees in. So right, you want your low back to have its natural curvature. Feeling again here, you're on your back, so hip bones and pubis bone lifting away from the floor evenly, not rocking forward or backward. And then while that happens, it's gonna be common for the front of your body to feel like, oh, I need to poof up towards the ceiling. So you need to keep that in your pelvis and your back body, but let your whole front body draw down. Your organs, your ribs. See if with then drawing the knees in, you've really deepened the hip crease here. So I hope you can really feel that, because it feels really great to actually get into those creases of the hip. So you could even kind of move the legs around a little bit just with that intention of getting deeper into the hip crease. Taking the hands now underneath the thighs. The hands are just gently reminding the thighs that the job is down, my friends, as the feet flex and the feet press more up. So don't get yourself to the point where your joints feel stressed out or strained out here, or to the point that your pelvis moves away from neutral, or to the point that your ribs pop up. And just seeing here, this is happy baby, but a much more active version here. As you feel ready, go ahead, release and relax that.
Maybe just crossing your legs a little bit, drawing your crossed legs in towards your belly and kind of finding a place to grab onto, a place to roll around that feels like a good little stretch. And then, of course, taking it to the other side as well. Maybe if you wanted to twist a little bit this morning, rolling the lower body over to one side, you can kind of decide how put together you want to feel versus kind of how, like, sometimes I imagine myself in these twists like a Lego set that just crashed to the floor and the Legos all crash away from each other. But sometimes I don't like to feel like that in a twist. Sometimes I like to feel more buttoned up. So of course, if you take one side, you can take the other. You can always find fun things to do with your arms too. You know, you can circle your arms around for a little bit of movement. You can change your shoulder positioning or make your shoulder positioning more active. So lots of ways to customize the twist. Let's go ahead and from here, just come towards a comfortable resting position, whether that's you on your back or in a comfortable seat, or even with your legs swung up on an ottoman or something like that. Like, that's definitely a favorite. It'll actually give us the time this morning during our practice to have a little bit of a shavasana, a little bit of a meditation, if that's how you'd like to end your practice today. Now, this next bit is just a time for us to rest a little bit. And rest can look different for different people. So let's not try to impose any rules on ourselves about should we move, should we fidget. You know, we'll just do the best that we can to feed our nervous system information that we're safe so that our nervous system can downregulate and can give us the output of strength, mobility, and stability, both in our physical bodies and in our psychological space. So see here if you can let your body breathe on its own the same way that it would in the deepest, most restful part of sleep during the night. And then having a sense that we are more than the content of our thoughts. We are not our thoughts, which are always coming and going, always changing. We are that which witnesses our thoughts. We are not our sense perceptions. We are that which witnesses our sense perceptions. We are not our bodily sensations or our emotions or our feelings. We are that which witnesses all of those things. And so just getting a sense here that we are more than all of the things that we experience. We are so much more. And with this sense about you, see if you can let the boundaries of your body become a little bit more blurry. So that as you are experiencing yourself right now, you can't really discern where your body ends and your clothes or the air in the room begins. So as if we could open up our experience of our body so that our body was no longer just this personal vessel, but that our body was really the whole world and the whole universe. And so if you'd like to continue to rest and be here, then you can do that. Otherwise, we can begin to move our bodies a little bit. And as we move it, we're reminded of those boundaries again of like, oh, yep, my toes end down there, my fingers end over here. So getting a sense that yes, while that which my brain has the access to control ends at my fingers and my toes, that my fingers and my toes are intimately connected with the rest of the world and the universe in a way where there's no separation. And so as you start to move your body, feel it more as a relationship between the part of you that you can control, that your brain has access to control with like motor neurons and things like that, right? Versus the part of your body outside that it's all connected to still. And so if you'd like to come on up to a seat, you can transition any way that feels good. And I always like to spend a few moments in the seated position because now this is like more upright. It's more, I sit all day long when I'm on the phone and at meetings and doing my work. And so my psychology really has a strong hold when my body is in this shape. So this is our opportunity to get ourselves nice and lifted, to treat the shape the same way that we treated all of our shapes during our practice. Alrighty, my friends, thank you so much for joining in today's neutral pelvis practice. I hope that this again becomes another little snippet that you can bring into your other practices that'll help make your other practices feel more informed and more straightforward, and will help you become the adaptable, strong vessel of a human that you deserve to be. So next week, same time, same place on YouTube. Our theme is snaky spine. So it's going to build on a lot of what we've been doing recently in our lower body, because of course our spine can't have freedom to move if it's not sitting on top of a really well-developed structure of the hips, the pelvis, the legs. So I'm really excited to bring that to the table next week. In the meantime, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. You can also find me at our weekly letter if you're not already subscribed to that. That's where I send out all of the notifications for live streams every week. So my website link is in my YouTube channel. Should be pretty straightforward once you get there to sign up for the letter. That's all free. And then if you feel inclined to donate money to us, I will put a description link below, which will also take you to our website where you can choose to make a monthly donation on our Patreon for some cool content over there, or a one-time donation through our website. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.